Check. Okay, we're now recording. So this is the demo wallet here. So, you know, don't get all excited to see my wallet pop up. I've never used that wallet before these demo videos. So arguably speaking, I'm kind of new at it myself. But I do like at least how it allows priority gas. So okay, so for this exact demonstration, I want you guys to know something. We did in fact have a bit of a we did learn about something in the summoning circle. So the summoning circle is a smart contract associated with PyreSwap. Summoning circle is in fact a modified version of the Spooky Swap Brew Boo system. Are you guys familiar with that system? Or have you heard of Spooky Swap? Okay. Yep. All right. So anyway, the point being is the version that Spooky Swap has is not what we think. It isn't. It wasn't designed to be I guess you could say have fees extracted from it every 6 hours. Does that make sense? I think on Spooky Swap they have like a slower pace for how they distribute fees. Or they have like a variable pace, which is kind of weird. It's more like a bounty system, kind of like the way Yield Wolf works. But we kind of modified it so that it doesn't have a bounty system. Rather, you know, it just gets triggered from somebody clicking Transpire Epoch. And basically speaking, we figured out that if we were in fact sending the entirety of the LP that we were clicking out as fees to the incantation, effectively speaking, if we didn't have new liquidity showing up into the summoning circle address, it was effectively going to choke new fees from showing up in an incantation. So I believe that's what Electronic noticed, that there was an extreme drop off in fees. And effectively speaking, I see people are staking now. Is that what I'm seeing? Staking is going up. So anyway, I'm going to go over again why you maybe don't want to stake this early, but you can stake this early for observing how EPR changes. And you guys can see my screen, right? You guys are looking at the same screen as yesterday, the incantation witch vault. You guys can see that. You can't see a screen, really? Oh, goodness gracious. No, you know what? That is useful. That is useful because what I realized, the mistake I was making there is okay. No, I appreciate that. And again, I am arguably new at this. My OBS was not. My OBS is recording the screen. I guess now it wasn't being shown on Discord though. Okay, you guys can see it now. All right, fantastic. So. I'm noticing that this current amount staked was increased and then decreased to bring EPR from 16 to 13 and then back, right? So you see it happening right there. It went from 16.1 to 13.6, and that's from somebody staking and unstaking, which is arguably, this is a good practice to do for this mechanism because you can actually begin to kind of, it's from doing this that you can kind of figure out how much you expect EPR to compress due to more people piling in the last moment, in the ultimate moment, perhaps in the last minute. Yeah, absolutely. Could you address if someone could just choose not to stake prior to Epoch, change to avoid flogging, and just go for usurping instead? Yeah, and that's actually what I did yesterday. That is what I did because we had, first of all, let's notice, for those of you who were here yesterday, and in fact that's about half of you, somebody was staking for a lot more, and now they're not staking for that much more, are they? Yeah, somebody is in fact unstaked all of that. They in fact unstaked all of that. They in fact unstaked their position probably due to EPR changing. And do we know if they noticed that they had negative yield as well? That's not clear, but we can check to see. What exactly happened. So, cheater, cheddar. Okay, so we looked at holders of this before. So now we have 17 holders of Stake by Phantom. That's certainly interesting. Now, what you might have noticed is that this is actually a few people staking in amounts under 200. By the way, that's much more reasonable. So you could arguably understand that people are learning to play this game. I'm probably looking at your wallets right here. That's great. There's no problem there at all. And let me make sure it's not one of mine. I'm trying to be unstaked right now. But, okay, I did unstake. But you guys can see that whoever was playing last time, you guys remember yesterday, there was a person staked for 500, another person staked for 800 or 900, and they have in fact unstaked. So we don't see their quantities here. Pyre Phantom has changed, and you can see that the total amount staked. These are in fact beta testing compliant amounts. I mean, 180 could be on the long side, but it's not that much longer. It's not like double, right? It's a little under double, and I think 125 would be the exact $5 amount. So all these amounts are good for playing with, and it also allows the EPR to look arguably attractive, right? 13.6%, meaning a daily of 54%. Who doesn't want a daily of 54% yield? But I do want to address Electronics. He spoke in general chat about the yield going down. Yeah, that was a choke point that we found. So the good news is we're gonna. This is a real beta test, by the way. I'm not calling it a beta test as like some sort of wink, wink, nod, nod thing. This is a real beta test, and we are testing to see how it works and where it fails and what are the parts that we're overlooking. So we did overlook that if we send the whole amount, we in fact disable the summoning circle's ability to collect more incantations for the next epoch. So now we're going to in fact modify that the slightest bit so that there's always a bit of reserve left over. If that makes sense to you guys. And that's how that fucking works. That's how that works. So that was the best solution for this version. And it is possibly likely that, I'll be clear about this as well, later on in beta, and that might be, I don't know, a few weeks from now, we will in fact be redeploying the DEX components as well, in which case we might not be using Summoning Circle, or rather not this version of Summoning Circle. We might look for a different method of fee accrual from transaction volume. And there are other versions of that in the DeFi sphere, and we might in fact use a different strategy to acquire fees, so that way that we it can be a little bit more gas optimized, and it can also not end up with the shortcomings that the Brew Boo system has, at least in our opinion, which we have modified to create the Summoning Circle system. But anyway, so does that answer your question, Electronic? And to answer this again, how did this EPR come from? Yeah, that is exactly what I was going to talk to you about. Okay, so I actually front-loaded this incantation. So what that means is I used the meeting taxes. By the way, this is one of the reasons we have meeting taxes, in order to create more Pyre Phantom, and then I just sent it into the pending contract. Because when we were doing this during closed beta, we were just front-loading it to test it how it would play out. Does that make sense? So we can continue to front-load it, at least for training purposes. It is not our goal to keep manually front-loading this, because that kind of means that it doesn't work. But the point being is, eventually this will organically be from transaction volume. Does that make sense? Like truly a positive feedback loop. I don't know if you guys have any background with things like mechanical engineering, but if you ever run a lawnmower that works from petroleum, you actually have to start it by pulling it, right? You pull a string, and what that string does is it primes the rotary system. Does that make sense? Like you have to manually put mechanical energy into the system first in order for it to get to self-sustaining equilibrium. Does that make sense? Am I talking to an audience of people that have operated a lawnmower before? Or any sort of, yeah, okay. Bowman has used a lawnmower. Electronic has used maybe a weed whacker. Any type of gardening tool that has a pole start, that's effectively the same thing we're doing. Does that make sense? Arguably I have no idea where people are from, or if they live, because if you don't live in America, you probably don't even worry about lawns. And then, the way that we deal with gardening here is a little bit unique as well. But, okay, so that's basically what we're doing, and that's why the EPR here can look quite attractive at whatever position you end up at. And let's see, what do I have today? I have 0. Okay, what does that mean? I hope that answers your question about where this EPR came from, Electronic, because I know you pointed out before, it's like, wait, it's below 1 now. Did something happen? The answer is yes, something did happen, but we are already in the process of fixing it. By next epoch, so the epoch that is, the incantation that's not 42 minutes from now, but the one that's 6 hours, 42 minutes from now, it should not need to be front-loaded. We should just have it firing normally, if that makes sense. So that is, again, this is a real beta test. We're not pretending to be in a beta test. This is a real beta test. Okay. So Pyre Phantom is at 0.11, and that is in fact lower, so that's shielded. And if you don't mind me, I will just swap whatever I'm holding. Let's see, what do I have? I have 2 ohm. Yeah, why not? Okay, let's see. During the AMA, could you address if someone could just choose not to stake prior to epoch change to avoid flogging and just go for usurping instead? Yeah, I absolutely will. And in fact, what I will do, Pega, is I will pull this off the screen actually. I will in fact pull up the document that is most applicable to that right there. And that is in fact the how to assess risk document. Okay. So what I'll do right now is let me answer Electronic. I'm going to answer Pega's question first, and then I'm going to answer your question. So, does that make sense? Yes, Pega, and I talked about this with actually with Clan Tonso and Seabiscuit yesterday. So I don't know if you were logged into that part, but Clan Tonso, do you remember talking about this maybe? Or I think Seabiscuit was the person who was asking about this. Yes, Pega, it can be advantageous to just wait. However, the advantage you have from not waiting is first mover advantage. Does that make sense? So, generally speaking, a lot of people yesterday, I don't know if you saw this, I was going to just flat out usurp. Like I said like, hey guys, I'm not going to play this round. I'm going to, in fact, pester this round. So the first thing we're going to talk about here is that there's three general strategies. Like, there's 3 general strategies, and we call them playing, passing, and pestering. And I don't know if this translates across English, but like playing means you're actually going to scalp yield. Does that make sense? Oh, really? Oh, yeah, you're probably right. Were you going to front run me? It's fine. Yeah, we'll swap. That's fine. Yeah, and it's okay if it's okay if I don't too, because again, Pega, Alessio, we still have a good 39 minutes here, right? It's not like anybody will be rushing into the Witchfall yet, right? So I'm going to answer Pega's question first about playing and pestering and playing, passing, and pestering. So generally speaking, Pega, if you're playing, that's any strategy that you're actually going to attempt to scalp yield, right? Playing is actually, I'm going to attempt to scalp yield like the normal way. And believe it or not, this is normally, oh yeah, thank you, Leslie, I appreciate it. This is normally the correct way to play. However, due to the, I guess, lack of understanding about how this is played, right now, usurping is a method to educate people who refuse to read the docs. Does that make sense? Like, so, like, to be honest, usurping is not likely to outperform regular playing, like not in the long run. Does that make sense? Because if nobody's playing, you can't usurp. Does that make sense? Like if everybody's usurping, then nobody's playing, right? If you manage to usurp before anyone withdraws, do you receive the same profit as if you were staking prior to the epoch change? Yes, and you might even receive more. You might even receive more. But the thing is, Pega, what you're betting on here is you're betting on the fact that you're going to be faster at staking in, claiming and unstaking than somebody else is from just claiming and unstaking. Does that make sense? So you have to do two different things. Does that make sense? And you're also all usurping. You can't even do it until the epoch transpires, which is another blockchain event. Yep. Yeah, exactly, Electronic. Yeah, I think a lot of people usurped a bit more. Yep. So usurping is only advantageous right now because like there's people who are staking too early. Does that make sense? And arguably, I'm only doing this to educate them. But to be honest, the more consistent way, like the more realistic way, and arguably the lower risk way is to play it. And the reason why usurping is actually not advantageous over time, let's put it this way. If nobody's ever playing, then you can't usurp at all. Does that make sense? Like if nobody ever plays, then you can't usurp. Do you get what I'm saying? Because like that's who the yield goes to. Does that make sense? So one, usurping is derivative of other people's playing. Does that make sense? So if nobody's playing, you can't usurp at all. Oh, 100% Pega, but as you noticed, the Marma sets from yesterday, they already unstaked. So people did learn to effectively, that like when EPR goes, like, however they're going to learn, they will learn, for sure. So Pega, you could do it, but here's what you got to realize. Do you see these buttons right here? Claim, unstake, and max swap for Phantom. Claim, unstake, and max swap for 2 ohm, and 1 for 3 ohm and Z ohm as well. Do you see these right here with their own like slippage tolerance field at the bottom here? You guys see this? Yeah, so you're basically, so you're effectively running uphill during a mudslide of red candles eventually, right? Like right now you don't see the candles as red because we're playing with small amounts of money, but like later on, like when TWAPs get a bit higher, you're basically trying to jump in and run up a fucking mountain during a mudslide of red candles in order to steal somebody's pie that's cooling on a windowsill. Like, it is probably more likely, it's probably more advantageous and more consistent to play before the epoch, take what you can get from this, because this is, of course, a very, very, this is already high risk enough. When you usurp, it's like you're increasing the risk. Does that make sense? You now have a risk that everybody else is now in before you, and they're now able to unstake and leave with, by the way, the incants you're trying to usurp. Does that make sense? So you're now, like, let's put it this way. If Pega, you wanted to usurp right now, while Jeff and Ertan and Why So Cynical and Doc and Electronic and Abuelito and Bo and Joel and Clantonto and Lezio, we're all deciding to play, like you're betting, Yeah, exactly, Lezio. Yeah, exactly. Because you're now one move behind. And I don't know if you know anything about chess, Pega, but being one move behind will fuck up your whole shit. Does that make sense? In fact, in chess, the white team has like a 4% winning advantage over the fucking black team. Isn't that crazy? Black is like a fucking historically disadvantage. Yeah, well, you get what I'm saying, Pega? So this is like, usurping can win, but it's like playing black on chess. Does that make sense? You only have a 46% chance of winning. So you do have there is a non-zero chance of winning, but to be honest, Pega, as more and more players learn this, and that's why am I gonna continue to do these daily AMAs? Oh, and Seabiscuit is here now. So Seabiscuit, if you look up in this chat, he asked yesterday, wouldn't it make more sense to actually play and then claim on cants and then get out? Because if you usurp, you're actually a move behind, and that is correct. Like, it is higher risk. Now, are you effectively shielded from smoldering? Sure, but so was the last guy who staked in before the epoch ended. Does that make sense? Like, think about it this way: if we had 50 people stake, if you were to discount the amount of staking here. In fact, let me pull up that document. Let me pull that up. Where? If I were to pull this up with Brave real quick. Oh, this is the wrong one. Okay. So if we were to go down here and go all the way down here and look at, let's go back all the way down to like negative yield, which is like page down here. Okay, so I'll give this image out too. I'll post this image in the chat. So you have these positive and negative percentages, and then here you have this risk assessment. So I don't know if you remember during the AMA, but we actually had 57 stakes. So 50 was correct because whoever that guy that was staked in towards 800, he literally took -5 to the fucking face just for like not reading the documentation and not coming to AMA. He just stood there and took it the whole time. Everybody watched it. Again, it's not that bad. It's only like a $2 loss for him. But again, like if we were playing for larger amounts of money, arguably that would be a more painful lesson. So if we're at 50, then you have to understand that there's up to -5% in yield you should consider to be offsetting. Does that make sense? Meaning, if there's 50 stakers, any EPR below 6 is like not even worth playing for a yield of 1% per epoch. You want arguably like above 9% will be better because you have 4% per epoch. Does that make sense? And the thing is, of those 50 stakers, consider this. About half of those 50 stakers will receive less than half of that 5% negative yield. Does that make sense? So like the latest 25, they're only going to receive a maximum of 2.5% negative yield. So they even receive less than this 5%. Does that make sense? So like if you think about like smoldering as being a risk, well the thing is you need to assess it that assume that you're last, assume that you're last but try to be, assume that you're first but try to be last. And we have that actually written here. Try to stake last but assume you'll stake first. So if you mentally discount yield to say like, okay, I'm going to assume that there's going to be 50 stakers this round. So I'm going to assume that I have -5 in exposure. If that's the case, you should just target EPRs like that are around 9% or 22%. Like between 9 and 22, those are all great EPRs for you. Does that make sense? Because you're going to walk away with a net yield between 4 and 16% for that epoch. Does that make sense? I like how I have like 80% of the same people here today, but I guess that's fine. We're going to start tweeting these AMAs out on Twitter, and we're going to start increasing the amount of participation. Obviously, I would like to try to get to a few dozen players as opposed to I don't know, a dozen-ish. Does that make sense? And yeah, and if I have to suck it up and actually do YouTube promotion for that, I will as well. But yeah, so for right now, we already have 9,000 people in Discord servers, and we have something like, I don't know, 15,000, or we have like 12,000 on Twitter. So yeah, we're not completely noiseless, but we've been kind of keeping this quiet for the sake of control. But we can start scaling it up now. At least once I hear from the developers that Summoning Circle is now redeployed. But anyway, so if you're going to usurp, Pega, you're basically betting that like you're going to beat these 49 people to the swap. Does that make sense? So if you're going to guess that 50 people staked in, does that make sense? Oh yeah, and by the way, we have access there as well. But by the way, the circus itself is like 40 people right now, and some of them are still huge bag holders of other projects. And yeah, like if they want to, they can do that. But what I'll do, Pega, before I'm going to ask people to promote this, I will in fact use our actual Twitters. Oh, great question, Bo. So when you look at this right here on the dash, we have total stakes in previous epoch. Does that make sense? And then we have total staked wallets here. This is a little bit, right now, Bo, this right here is a question mark. Do you see the 3 question marks here? Yep. So this part of the dashboard is not finished yet, but it will be. One of the ways we can check right now is we can look at holders of staked Pyre Phantom on this website, which is called a block explorer. I don't know if you're super literate on block explorers, but in theory, Pega, yeah. In theory, yeah, that would be like an accidental usurping, for sure. Yes, but also, yeah. Pega, there's also risk involved with that involve things like supply change and price change. Does that make sense? So there's also an advantage there's also, does that make sense? Yeah, so as long as you get comfortable with the risk appetite, you can dabble with all of this. By the way, Pega, since you most likely will end up being knighthood loyal, usurping is all about your shit. Like, it's kind of your job to ruin this game for other players because the players of this game are witches, and if you're a knight, later on, being a knight is all about being antagonistic to this game because this is a PvP game, if that makes sense. So yeah, you're welcome to usurp. And by the way, so Bo, you can see here that we have 17 holders of staked Pyre Phantom. Does that make sense? So we have 17 holders of this, and because we have 17 holders, we now know that 17 people are staked right now. Does that make sense? We can also see their balances right here in this list. If you want to see this list, I'll actually I will paste it into this chat if you want to look at it yourself. And you have to click holders here. You have to click Bo, you see this blue button here, holders. If you click holders, you can now see the wallets and who's holding what. This is right here is why we also say not for beginners, Bo, because this asking people to actually look up things on the Block Explorer website while we're in beta testing is kind of it looks a bit unpolished, would you say? Does that make sense? Like, oh, you have to verify the data here on a different website. Eventually, we will have this functional. That might be functional within a few. It might be functional by the end of the day. Like, I can't speak on like what the devs are going to do, but I hope that makes sense. But yeah, Pega, okay. Is staked Pyre Phantom immune to decay? Great question. No. The answer is no. Yeah, staked Pyre Phantom, you get smolders and you get decay. Staked Pyre Phantom decays at whatever price Pyre Phantom is in. So staked Pyre Phantom also decays at the same metrics, and it gets smoldering and decaying. Does that make sense? And the difference is the decaying is parallel with everybody, so the price is, everybody gets it. But smoldering, everybody gets smoldering at a different amount because they all hold different amounts. Anyway, so let's see. Okay, Pega, does that answer your question about pestering? Because by the way, let me go back up to here. Yeah, pestering is a valid strategy. You can attempt to do it every single epoch, okay? Playing is any strategy where you are pursuing claiming incances yield. So yield scalping is playing, right? It does not discriminate or differentiate based on mode of acquisition or size of position. Playing is when you're playing. So everybody who's going to stake in the last minute here on this call, even right on this stage, they're all playing. But people who are usurping can be described as pesterers. Does that make sense? Later on, and I believe this was a question more about speculative trading. By the way, meadotrage, when you're able to mead on people as well that buy, it's also like a pester because you're kind of taking away a few percentage points of their position. Does that make sense? So meadotrage, if you happen to just mead at a certain point in the epoch that is interrupting people playing on the IWV, that's also like a pestering move. Does that make sense? And you could argue that canonically, when we think about pestering, it's going to be blamed on knights in this server. So all pestering, we just assume those are knight players doing this to us, right? Which I know most of you guys might still identify as knight players, but when people start identifying more as witch players, arguably when this game gets a little bit more exciting and perhaps a little bit more lucrative, people who are playing this way are going to be, you get what I'm saying. Witches are able to fuck up the knights as well, and that is more related to boardroom prints. So witches who are parasitic in the boardroom are also able to kind of be... So knights are able to be parasitic on witches, and witches are able to be parasitic on knights. And I'm going to go into that later when TWAPs are a bit higher. So right now, you just have to think about meadotrage, which, by the way, is a change in pyrogas total supply. This is a risk, right? So... for an epoch's worth of time leading to the next incantation, participants may be engaging in a variety of behaviors that affects the parameters. One of these activities is known as meeting, and this activity has the ability to expand the supply of pyre gas. And it's by a limited amount. Do you guys know that it's 1% of 2 ohms total supply? Meaning later on, when Pyre Phantom's total supply is larger, the amount of damage that meeting is able to do will be a bit reduced. Does that make sense? Because as one of them grows, the other one shrinks. Does that make sense to you guys? You guys get what I'm saying? Okay. Meeting is only available under certain conditions, and that is below 0.8 TWAPs. And I mean TWAPs of the peg coins, okay? So this can potentially cause a surprise surge in supply. This can lead to disruption and noise in the price chart over time or all at once. When assessing risk for the IWV, it would be astute to forecast potential supply surges. Because once we're up at higher TWAPs, I guarantee you nobody's going to be playing with $5 anymore. Does that make sense? So if somebody fucking meads for $1,000, you will definitely notice that on the price chart later on. Does that make sense? But again, the incantation of Witch Fault will eventually clean up all that supply through smoldering. Okay, so yeah, playing, passing, pestering. Passing is really when you decide kind of just not to play. Like, you were going to play, but you decide, you know what, I'm just going to fucking exit right now. This will be something that people do more often when we're above 0.8. Does that make sense? Because pestering kind of makes passing a little bit harder. And it's not going to be that exciting to trade the velvet rope pattern when TWAPs are low. Does that make sense? Because if you trade the pattern, you're kind of exposing yourself to meter-trough pestering. Does that make sense? And if you're trading the pattern, well, let's just say you do get EPR at the same amount, but not everybody's going to be thrilled about it happening. Does that make sense to you guys? We've got 21 minutes left here, but I will go over as well because I might do the pestering as well this time. So me and Pega can both participate in pestering. But yeah, I'm assuming most of you guys will be out by then, but I'll pester again because that's sort of what helps. And let me see if I answered. Okay, on the phone you'll pass. Okay. Well, then I'll do the pestering, and I might do a little playing as well anyway, because you can play and then usurp anyway. So I'll stake and usurp. Electronic, you had the question. Okay, rough conversion rate from volume to incantations. Exactly. Okay, what a great question. And it is great to know this because what we can do here is we can go to deck screener, right? And the best way to search for this is just to search for the fucking coin, right? So I'm going to search for Pyre Phantom, and we will just go to the fucking decks that it's on, which is this one. And you click unknown decks here in the top right, if you guys are aware of that. And now this is what Pyre Swap is on deck screener. It is unknown decks. It is a question mark. Does that make sense? But it has a 24-hour volume of about $1,800, right? You see, you're familiar with this, Electronic? Okay, so as you're aware right now, Electronic, we have a 0.7% swap fee. This is not a swap fee that is very useful for anyone. Does that make sense? Would you guys agree? Oh, yeah, but it's fine. Yeah, I mean, you can look at it here, but arguably Electronic, yeah. I would say that, like, I care more about, let me see, can you not? Let me see, last 24 hours, I can do last 6 hours. Oh, look at that. Yeah, you're right. It just didn't work. Okay. I do have the app for Dexter on my phone, but to be honest, Electronic, I'll just assume it's 1,800 divided by 4. Does that make sense? Like, that's like I'm fine with doing the math that way. Does that make sense? Like, it might not be, but like in the long run it'll be fine. Does that make sense? Because again, you know, we only had one Australian or two Australians last time, and we also did it on Friday instead of because it's 1,800 right now for 24 hours. Do you see this? Do you see the screen? 1,800. Yeah. So instead of, like, you're correct. I can't filter by 6 hours on the thing, but yeah. But it's, to be honest, Electronic, just looking at it at the 24-hour window will give you like the it'll provide the necessary mathematics to kind of look at it over day by day anyway. Does that make sense? Looking at it epoch by epoch, there will be variation, by the way. So epoch by epoch, you're not always going to see an uptrend, and we call that Elliott wave principle. You remember me talking about Elliott wave principle yesterday? Look at that. Yeah, so you're not going to always see it go up, not only in EPR, sometimes in price. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's my shit, Electronic. That's my fucking shit. Anyway, so you can look at the price chart right now. In fact, let's go find Pyre Phantom on... let's look at it like this. Pyre Phantom against Z... let's see. We can do Pyre Phantom against 3 only, fine. Anyway, so you can even see that it kind of coasts. Like, it's like, wait a minute, it's going up and it's going down? Does that make sense? I could probably get into a, 15 minutes is fine, actually. It's going up and it's going down? Does that make sense? And you can actually start seeing that, what is this? People are starting to buy because they're like, oh, wait a minute, it's shielded from me to trash. I bought it, shit. Does that make sense? Oh, like the dollar against fucking euro or whatever? Yeah, they have the euro coin. They have a euro coin. I think Circle has one now. Yeah, but don't even worry about that. Yeah. Anyway, let me focus on answering your first question. Does that make sense? Let me focus on answering your first question. Yeah, exactly. I know what you mean. Anyway, so the point being is you're not necessarily going to see Pyre Phantom go up every single epoch. Does that make sense? You're not going to see EPR go up every single epoch, but what you will see is over time, and I mean, think of it more like day by day, you're going to see Pyre Phantom go up in price and the EPR, or rather the size of the incantation, go up in price. Does that make sense? Because every incantation, in fact, adds more volume into the epoch behind it. Does that make sense? So what we end up doing is we end up taking the fees from, we take the fees from, I'll just do military time, 000 to 0600, and we buy Pyre Phantom with those fees. Does that make sense? That's with positive price impact. Then we park those fees in the pending contract, which is actually the meet address, and we let it wait for 6 more hours. We distribute these incants at 12 o'clock. Do you guys understand that? Do you guys understand 000 is midnight, and then 0600 is 6 a.m., and then 1200 is 12 noon? Do you guys understand that? Okay, so understand electronic. All of the volume used to get all of the volume used to collect those incants is going to happen in the epoch that it's pending. Does that make sense? So suddenly epoch number 2 is the volume is getting enhanced by what happened in epoch number 1. Does that make sense? So what happened in epoch number 1 is going to make epoch number 2 a little bit more attractive. Does that make sense? And what happens after these get distributed? Everybody fucking dumps. Does that make sense? Everybody fucking exits. Does that make sense? So we're taking what happened in epoch number 1, then we're incentivizing volume in epoch number 2, and then we're almost guaranteeing volume in epoch number 3 based on what happened in epoch number 1. Does that make sense? So over time, we are in fact compounding this. It's just not a single epoch cycle. It's a 3 epoch cycle. Does that make sense to you guys? Like, you gotta understand that do you guys understand that? Does anyone not understand that? So it spreads it out, and it's not gonna look like a this is not going, it spreads it out, but it's meant to, because that way we end up with a more even we end up with a more even EPR over time. Does that make sense? So this ends up smoothing, but right now this is the earliest, like literally this has been, the incantation is like less than a week old right now. Does that make sense? So like it's gonna be a bit jagged, and that's okay. Like we're beta testing it, and look at this, you can get a 10% fucking EPR right now in 13 minutes to play. Does that make sense? I will play with the 123 I have. Hilariously, that's the exact same amount I took home yesterday, wasn't it? On this wallet. So I will play with the 123. We'll see. Let's see how much it crushes it. Let's see how much 123 does. It's probably going to go down by 1/8, right? 1/9 maybe. So maybe go down to like 9.9, something a little bit. 9.3. There you go. So I'll claim it on stake real quick. Yeah, it's not zero sum, and one of the reasons electronic, I'm going to take a look at that for you. We have a let's go back to PyreSwap. So going back to this, you might be saying, how do I know it's not zero sum? And this is actually something I had to talk about with the devs. believe it or not, this is why we have pairs like Bitcoin against Phantom on the DEX. You see that there's $1,000 here? Does that make sense? So even though Zeom Z-Share is like our deepest pool, we also have Bitcoin against Phantom. Does that make sense? So it's not just the protocols getting wrapped up into themselves. You always have this small amount. By the way, it's not like a huge amount. You see right here, the volume is only $13. Does that make sense? Yeah, exactly. So think of it this way, Electronic. As you learned yesterday, 0.1% is a small change. But if it happens a whole bunch, it accumulates into a whole bunch of change, doesn't it? 0.1%, which is like the percentage of smoldering, right? If that happens once, who cares, right? I just did it to everybody once, who cares, right? But if it happens 50 times, now you have to think about it. Does that make sense? Now it's compounding. Do you guys understand that? Does anyone not understand what I'm saying here? Like smoldering one time, who cares? But if it happens 50 times, now you have to think about it. Everybody gets me here, yes? Yeah, exactly. It costs nothing. The point being is, does everybody understand what I mean about compounding? Like a small percentage with frequency becomes a large slice. Do I need to explain this? Jeff, you understand that? Pega, you understand that? Doc, why so cynical? Electronic, yep. Bo, I'm sure you understand that. Clanton, you understand it. Seabiscuit, Red Meat, Joel, Maddie, Alessio. Okay, you guys get it? So the point being is, and Doc, by the way, since I know you're a liquidity provider for this pair, the reason we need this $13 here is because while that looks like it's such a small fraction of this 1800, what we do know is that we always have a certain amount that's not being generated from the DEX itself. Does that make sense? That small tiny amount of volume, which by the way, this is a 0.7% swap fee. When we get lower fees on PyroSwap, these will have a lot more fees. Does that make sense? So for those of you, and I know there's a few of you, if you're providing what we consider blue chip, or this is what I call matchstick liquidity, by the way. Matchstick. If you ever hear me refer to matchstick liquidity, this is why we have arbitrage pairs. Because the arbitrage bots are in fact bringing us the linchpin. Like the linchpin, yeah, the linchpin of volume that allows the entire rest of the machine to spin. Does that make sense? Because if we were just fucking cycling our own money back to each other, it would be a fucking Ponzi scheme. You guys get that? If we were just cycling our money back to each other, it'd be fucking a Ponzi scheme. So first of all, I could give you guys an entire dissertation on how fucking Bitcoin is not a Ponzi scheme. That involves probably 3 fucking hours. I'm not gonna do it right now. But the point being here is we have Ethereum wrapped and we have Bitcoin wrapped. They have nothing to do with this chain. Does that make sense? But we have about $800 here of liquidity. We will naturally deepen these pools later, especially in phase 2 and such. But the point being is these small liquidity pairs, they in fact allow a net amount to be driven to this entire DEX. And the thing is, we actually will later on, we will have, and we might not have them now, 2 ohm, 3 ohm, Z ohm, Pyre Phantom paired against Bitcoin and Ethereum pairs. So I don't even know if we have them now. We might have them now. Let me see. I did a bunch of them. Let me see. So here we have Pyre Phantom against USDC. Oh, look at that. Pyre Phantom against Bitcoin. Do you guys see it right there? It's $2 of liquidity. Do you guys see it? I think I just deployed it just to deploy it. Do you guys see that? It's $2 liquidity. But the thing is, we're going to deepen these pools because when Pyre Phantom has that volume, there's zero reason why we wouldn't let arbitrage bots drive more Bitcoin here. Do you guys get what I'm saying? Even if it's just small, tiny amounts. Let's see. Yeah, okay, the other ones might be too tiny to see volume right now. But yeah, see we have, I believe we have them paired against, yeah, here's Zeom against Bitcoin. Do you guys see Zeom against Bitcoin? Zeom Bitcoin, $13 in liquidity. People don't understand why I'm doing this. I'm not going to, this is really called Feidian liquidity theory, and I'm not really going to get into it a lot right now. But the point being is, okay, Pega, I got 8 minutes to answer your question. Or not Pega, Electronic. If you want, I will go over that as well after the epoch. Yes, Pega, that's exactly the correct. You don't need to do that. That is sort of what I consider my own responsibility. And by the way, Pega, phase 2 of PyroSwap will have farms, and those farms will also drive transaction volume. Also, also, we will not be using the 0.7% swap fee forever. It will, it will always be there, and we will always have LP at this tier, but there will be lower fee structures that both allow you guys to pay less in fees, as well as allow arbitrage bots to bring us more dust. Does that make sense to you guys? When I first debuted this project, I literally got criticized for the fee being so high. And somebody told me that this was a cash grab. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. The fee being high actually deters it from being a cash grab. If the fee was lower, I would be greedier. Does that make sense? Like if I was doing a lower fee, that would actually look greedier. I have a high fee, so that volume is kind of like under control. Does that make sense to you guys? Because if I have a lower fee, these things will see more arbitrage. Okay, yeah, so anyway, so right now it is like a slow climb, but that also allows us to differentiate noise from signal. Does that make sense? And right now we're looking at this. Okay, do you guys want to just kind of like, does everyone want to focus on playing this now? Do you guys want to talk about playing this? Okay, so again, 10%, and we have 9% here. If you look at actual Phantom Scan, right? If we look at Phantom Scan, let's see what we have there. Yeah, let's look at, it's the exact one I was looking for. So if we look at holders, we now know that we have 20 holders. There is now 20 holders. So now a few more people are staking a bit high. Somebody over here is staking with 145. That's probably about $5. I mean, I'm playing with 123. So again, some people here, these might just be like fucking bots. Does that make sense? This might be like an arbitrage bot that just like took a bit and like stuck it. Does that make sense? I don't know why they would end up with it because we don't have it in liquidity, but yeah. So these wallets have 0 too. Does that make sense? Oh, that mechanism does not work yet, Pega. Yeah. Believe it or not, this number here does not update on time. And it also doesn't show quantity changes. So when I'm smoldering these guys, if I was gonna flog all the stakers right now, you would not see this number change because Phantom Scan does not update this. It does not update this at the same rate that we have current Pyre Phantom staked at. Does that make sense? So we actually, this box right here on our dashboard is superior to Phantom Scan. Unfortunately, right now this is inferior, right? So we're beating Phantom Scan here. We're losing to them here, and we don't have this yet here, which probably requires a subgraph maybe. But yeah, this would be like, this metric here would also give you like an idea of fuck it. I'm not gonna get into that right now. Okay, does anyone have other questions that you want me to answer? And I can explain more. I will actually answer Alessio's question here about 1800 and how we can determine what's creating what. First of all, 1800, we can just look at if we divide 1800 by 4, we have $450 per epoch. Does that make sense? This is wrong. Maybe it's not wrong, but we're gonna assume it's wrong or assume it's right. If we have $450. And they're getting a times 0.007 swap fee, that means that roughly $3 in swap fees is collected every single epoch. Does that make sense to you, Electronic? Okay, so right now I believe the incantation is about half of it. So if we took this in half times 0.5, $1.57 per epoch. Does that make sense? $1.57 is like, what? You're kidding. It's only $1.57 in total APR? Yes. 100% yes. Do you know why? Like, we don't need more than $1.57 in fees. Do you know why? One, we are telling everybody to play with $5 right now. Does that make sense? So if we have $1.57 in fees, let's now think about what everybody's actual appetite is. Does that make sense? So if we assume that everybody's willing to play to 10% EPR or something like that, maybe lower, maybe higher, As this gets more popular, that's only driving more volume to capture that APR. So right now, we're looking at 40% daily or 10% per epoch. Does that make sense? So in order to capture 10%, how much more do we need to drive in volume? Times 10? That's $15.75 of activity. Does that make sense? So electronic, I don't know where this $15 comes from because some of it is just meted over. Does that make sense? It's not bought per se, right? But what do I know? What do I know about this volume? I know that a lot of it is going to end up claiming, unstaking, and max swapping literally 3 minutes from now. Does that make sense? So right now, the way that this fee is delivered, it has so much risk involved, we can in fact leverage it in order to compound future volume. Does that make sense to you guys? I know this is a little bit hard to understand, but that $1, that $1.57, automatically it drives probably $15 in volume. And the thing is, electronic, believe it or not, it can actually drive that volume twice. It can drive that volume twice. So it's not just a 10x here, and I'm talking about 10x at EPR, because we still have a 10%, a 9.5, we'll call it 10x, but it can actually drive $30. Do you know why? Because people buy before the epoch and they sell. Does that make sense? So people buy before the epoch and they sell. That means that this small amount of volume right here, $450, is already compounding into how much? $450 of volume is now begetting perhaps $480 volume for the same conditions. Does that make sense? 5 seconds? Oh, should I worry about this? Okay, fine. Am I in? Am I in? Am I in? Am I in? Am I usurping? Am I in? Am I in? You know, I like talking about this stuff. Oh my God, who whaled it down? Who did it? Who was it? Who did it? Somebody played with a lot. 500? 5.8? Are we playing? No, the epoch is not transpired yet. I don't see it. 1200? 6.4? But if you see what I'm saying, electronic, everybody who's staking right now, whether they bought or whether they did, now they're effectively playing a fucking race to see if they can exit before everybody else. Now, believe it or not, do I have incants earned already? Let me see what it looks like. So I already have 35 cents of incants earned, but look, I got to... Whoosh. But listen, it's not enough. It's not enough just to claim it on stake. I got to go back and usurp. Come on. Yep, claim it on stake worked. Okay, what about now? Right, I took 7. I took about 7, which seems about right. Look, I got 9 more. Don't mind if I do. I hope that works. Did I get 3 or is it 9? I don't even know. Let's take a look. I got 9 more. Let's take. Look at that, 48 stakes in the previous epoch. 48. Somebody is just taking -5 like they have zero problem. 48 stakes in the previous epoch. Absolutely brutal. Oh, looks like it's empty. You guys see that? Looks like it's empty. Well, I will claim on a stake regardless. So yeah, I'm literally doing this manually as fuck. I'm doing it manually on screen share, and you see that I went from 123. Yeah, Maddie, I specifically did not use MetaMask for this demo. So I was fucking around with this. This is the first time I've used this wallet, and it's called Encrypt or whatever. But at least it works with PyroSwap, which is nice because certain wallets haven't worked. And other than that, if you want, right, so These buttons right here don't work yet. Like, these buttons don't work yet, but the way that you can, if you want to, like, maximize your fucking exit, you can, in fact, keep swap open on the other side, and then see if you acquire. Let's see, how many am I going to get? I'm still going to end up with more 2 ohm than I fucking started with. How amazing is that? I still end up with, what, I have 96 2 ohm before? Literally, look at that. We have everybody in this stage channel acting PvP as fuck, and like I'm doing this slow as fuck, and I'm still making profit. I wonder if I'm just gonna demo wallet this to fucking $1 million, right? I'm gonna take this $30 wallet.